Hey everyone, I'm doing a little research today from my video yesterday on the Great Reset. You may or may not have got a chance to see that. Go back and look. I know it's 20 minutes long, but it does explain quite a few things, at least about the Great Reset. And so today I actually sat down and watched about an hour's worth of video. Got a little bit more to go on it, and I heard the president of the EU today, and then also had John Kerry in it, and it's this big thing on the World Economic Forum, and it's right across the top. Again, it says a Great Reset. Excuse me. So they're doing that. So I noticed, though, there were three particular themes in the video I was watching, and so two of them I brought up in the video on the Great Reset yesterday were the two global things that I watch from global actors the most, which are so like health or world health. Right now, you're seeing people use the pandemic for this. So health initiatives, but then the other was environmental initiatives, and that those were two giant spheres under which all regulation and legislation can literally be shoved under. You know, you're even seeing people move like gun laws under public health. That was that's been one of the moves over the last few years. Is instead of talking about gun rights or rights of gun ownership or things like that, is to talk about gun violence and then move that under health. So that's just another example. So health initiatives and environmental initiatives are the two areas, but they actually list a third on there, which I don't really know why I didn't pick up on this before. But I mean, it's very recognizable. And that the other thing, so they're talking about accelerating um, health initiatives, right? And using the pandemic as the way to do that, to accelerate new health initiatives around the world, and then to accelerate environmental initiatives around the world. And the other was accelerate technology and technological uses around the world. Now, under the health initiatives, technology is producing vaccines. And then under environmentalism, technology is using technology for like green technology for environmental. They're talking about going to like a carbon neutral, by I think it was 2050. It could have been 2035 actually in the EU. So anyway, when they use technology, but then there's another use of technology which they don't really tell you what they mean when they say technology. So, but it got me thinking about technology, and I thought I would show you a little article today put out by Glenn Greenwald. If you don't know who he is, he broke the Edward Snowden story, worked for The Guardian, until recently worked for The Intercept, a media company he helped to found. And then the U.S. part of The Intercept tried to censor him, and he left his own media organization, and now he's working under Substacks. You don't know what Substacks are. Substack is a way a lot of independent journalists are making their money now. They write Substack newsletters. You can sign up for them. Usually they cost. So Greenwald's Substack is really worth the money. So I would pay it if you have the opportunity to do it. So he wrote an article, and he's pointing out some issues with the New York Times. The title of the article is "Demanding Silicon Valley Suppress Hyperpartisan Sites in Favor of Mainstream News. The New York Times is a fraud." All right, so that's the main title. The corporate news organizations masquerading as reliable and nonpartisan are, in fact, as hyperpartisan as any sites on the internet and spread just as much misinformation. So here's we're going to cut to the chase here. Facebook. So the change in Facebook. So Facebook spent a lot of time sort of with its algorithm cleaning out a lot of conservative news and a lot of political discussion from the conservative side just coming up to the election. So the change was part of the break glass plan. So break glass plans, you break glass in case of emergency, right? And so they viewed the political speech of the right in this country as an emergency. Break glass plans. Facebook, here we are. Facebook had spent months developing for the aftermath of contested elections. It resulted in a spike in visibility for big mainstream publishers like CNN, the New York Times, and NPR, while posts from highly engaged hyper-partisan pages such as Breitbart and Occupy Democrats, became less visible. And the employees said it was a vision of what a calmer, less divisive Facebook might look like. Some employees argued the change should become permanent, even if it was unclear how that might affect the amount of time people spent on Facebook. In an employee meeting the week after the election, workers asked whether the nicer news feed could stay, said two people who attended. Now, see, this is the way sort of totalitarianism works. And one of the things that really concerns me, generally speaking, is totalitarianism is different from authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is just really a ball dictatorship, right? But totalitarianism is like the old Soviet Union, where there's no opinions allowed outside of the official state opinion. So that's what a lot of what you're seeing in US news right now. You know, the US media used to be called the fourth estate. And the fourth estate was there to protect us, the little guy, by investigating government, by holding government accountable. But now the media is in a full sort of government protection mode, where they view independent journalists who investigate things to be threats to democracy. But by threat to democracy, really, it's just threat to the status quo, threat to the status quo in government. And so you can see how Facebook is really acting as a publisher and really is working to curb free speech. You know, which leads us to a little Tucker Carlson interview he did with a man here. Let's pull this up here and hear this guy.
Carolina and Florida. And we preserved more than 500,000 ephemeral experiences. That's a lot. That's about 30 times more data than we got in 2016. And we're finding a couple of things that are pretty clear. Number one is that Google's search results were strongly biased in favor of liberals and Democrats. This was not true on Bing or Yahoo. The bias was being shown to pretty much every demographic group we looked at, including conservatives. So in fact, conservatives got slightly more liberal bias in their search results than liberals did. How do you account for that? And then we also found what seems to be a smoking gun. That is, we found a period of days when the vote reminder on Google's homepage was being sent only to liberals. Not one of our conservative field agents received a vote reminder during those days.
That's a good place to stop. So you can see now Facebook has a break glass plan. So in the time leading up to, and then especially after the election, they begin suppressing sort of right or conservative views. And then you see leading up in the election, during the time leading up and the weeks leading up, you can see Google suppressing things in their algorithm. Like if you search for something, you wouldn't get a conservative site. You'd only get, like liberal sites. And if you were conservative, you got actually only liberal sites. Isn't that interesting? And then if you were conservative, you weren't reminded to vote, but liberals were reminded to vote every time they turn it on. So, and then of course, Twitter, I don't have anything on this, but everybody who's probably been paying attention or has a pulse remembers that, if you talked about the Hunter Biden story, the laptop that was discovered, pretty much you were Twitter banned. I mean, you were out, man, and they just got rid of you. And so one of the things that we're seeing is sort of health initiatives, and you're seeing global climate change initiatives, and then you're seeing tech, right? Big tech. And big tech is working now hand in hand with media companies and with the government to get rid of unpopular opinions or opinions. I shouldn't even say they're unpopular. I mean, you can't. I mean, Donald Trump received 70 million votes, more than 70 million votes, more than he received in 2016. And so you can say they're unpopular opinions with some segments of society, but they certainly aren't unpopular opinions with half of the society. I mean, that's about half of the voting population in the United States. So you can clearly see that we have sort of a totalitarian regime where if you deny, like mask mandates, or you produce any type of contrarian information in regards to, mortality rates among COVID, or if you show that, there their WHO, it's World Health Organization, meta studies that show masks haven't helped, that they actually suggested we stop doing lockdowns and things like that. If you show the great, let's see, I'll just pull it up right quick here. The Great Barrington Declaration, this is signed by, and it's infectious disease and epidemiologists. It's started by some folks from, I think they were Harvard and Stanford. You can go there and check that out yourself. But anyway, so you can see that if you start running against the grain in health initiatives, you're basically called a science denier. If you run against the grain in terms of climate and point out that there's like a 20-year pause, and that we haven't actually seen the temperature increases that were predicted, and that maybe carbon dioxide shouldn't be included as a greenhouse gas, anything like that, you're called a science denier. And then tech uses this sort of denial of facts, even though plenty of scientists here do not agree with what's going on as far as COVID policy. So that what they want to do is they have grave concerns about the damaging physical and mental health impacts of the prevailing COVID-19 policies and recommend an approach we call focused protection, right? Focused protection is targeted protection, right? Targeting the aged, targeting those who have comorbidities that are that would often or higher percentage prove fatal in their demographic, targeting plans towards them. But if you deny any of these things, they just call you a science denier, and then you get a big fat fact check thing that goes across the bottom of anything that you share, and pretty soon you're up for banning, or Facebook chokes down your algorithm and you don't reach anyone, and they're using tech. So the three themes then to watch in the global realm among globalists are going to be health, climate change, and technology. Not just the technology that goes into solar panels, and not just the technology that goes into vaccines, but the technology, the way tech can be used to, I'm going to use the word manipulate the masses. I think they would say educate the masses, but education can be manipulation if you leave out facts or you present certain facts in certain ways. So that tech is going to be used to manipulate the masses, manipulate the algorithms to toss anybody who disagrees or who has, especially if they have scientific credentials, they'll toss them down the memory hole. You'll never be able to find them, just like they've done with a lot of the statements that were made early on by Dr. Fauci and Surgeon General, even about masks and shutdowns and things of that nature. You're going to find that all that stuff's going to be really, really hard to find on the internet before long. The Wayback Machine's going to have to go back there and grab that stuff and hold on to it for us all, so that we can show folks what was actually being said originally versus what's actually been said now as being different. And then you can even do that with global warming, which, I slipped up. It's climate change. I forgot. When I was a kid, it was global cooling. Actually, I'm old enough to remember when in the 70s and early 80s, they were calling for a massive global cooling, and then they were calling for global warming. And now they just call it global climate change, because if you say global warming and it doesn't get warmer, or if you say global cooling and it doesn't get cooler, you look like a charlatan. So they say global climate change, which agrees pretty well, because the weather and climate frequently changes, and there are solar cycles and all kinds of other things that go into weather. In fact, we don't know as much about all that stuff as we even claim to know. What we don't know still dwarfs what we do know in regards to how all this stuff works. Which brings me to the final thing I want to say to you. F.A. Hayek, back in, I think it was the 40s, wrote a book called The Fatal Conceit. And the fatal conceit was how economists never could ever get enough information to make all the decisions to run an economy, and how the best way to run an economy was to allow those decisions to be made by the decision makers, you and me and the people. And he called it a fatal conceit. But globalism takes this fatal conceit and transfers it from economics, but they still do it in economics, because they have their fingers in the pies all over the place. They're trying to manipulate certain economic forces. But also too, they transfer this idea of fatal conceit. It can be transferred into global climate change, be transferred into health, it be transferred into technology. Again, they cannot ever have enough information. And then even if they did have it, they would not be smart enough to interpret it or lack the biases to interpret it to make the right decisions. And that the best way for the world to be run is for people to run it at the local level, at the family level. One of the things about globalists is they certainly demonstrate that much learning makes you mad. That the knowledge of a thing doesn't necessarily mean that you have the competency to make all the decisions that you think or to even come to all the conclusions that are accurate. And they've been wrong repeatedly in the past, and they never seem to learn their lesson. So the fatal consent, globalism, the problem with globalism is the same thing that's wrong with, like what's called Keynesian economics. It's a fatal conceit to believe. It's an arrogance and a pride that believes that you know enough at this macro level, that you have enough information and enough intelligence to make decisions for millions, or in fact billions of people. If you're a world transnational organization, make decisions for billions of people. It's just not true, and it ends up being a tyranny of the experts. And because science advances, you find out that the experts in the past were wrong. You're going to find out that the experts today are wrong about some things. And it's best that we live our lives from the local level, but also that we govern from the local level, and we never transfer so much concentrated power into these global institutions. All right, guys, that's all for today. May the Lord richly bless you all. Have a great Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.